So welcome everybody to another episode of the Michael Costa Show. This week will be another COVID edition. So let's just jump right into it. I know I've been talking about this for months, maybe even a year. But I will not stop hammering this nail because it's not possible that I've been saying this for a year and that I've noticed this a long time ago, but yet the governments don't see this. I refuse to believe that they don't see this. There's something else going on in the way they manage this pandemic. Because after a year, we have evidence of many things, and yet it seems like they're blind to it. Okay, in the post-millennial, reopened states with low COVID case counts show that lockdowns are a farce. Since the pandemic began, politicians and elected officials have mandated lockdowns and masks in nearly every state. For many months, lockdowns were purported to be both salve and savior, preventing people from getting COVID-19, a life-threatening disease. Over time, it's become clear as states like Texas and Florida have reopened before any others that continued lockdowns are unnecessary, unlawful, and perhaps were even always a farce. On March 2nd, Texas Governor Greg Abbott lifted the state's mask mandate and opened the states to its full capacity. In a statement, he said, "With the medical advancements of vaccines and antibody therapeutic drugs, Texas now has the tools to protect Texans from the virus," said Governor Abbott. "We must now do more to restore livelihoods and normalcy for Texans by opening Texas 100%. Make no mistake, COVID-19 has not disappeared, but it is clear from the recoveries, vaccinations, reduced hospitalizations, and safe practices that Texans are using that state mandates are no longer needed. With this executive order, we are ensuring that all businesses and families in Texas have the freedom to determine their own destiny." Wouldn't it be great if our leaders here in Canada, and more specifically in Quebec, would be talking like this? Wouldn't it give the population confidence and motivation to keep the measures, the sanitary measures of mask wearing, hand washing, 2-meter distance? If our leaders would be talking like this? To ask the question is to answer it. According to the New York Times, on that date, right? So the date was March 2nd. According to the New York Times, on March 2nd, new Texas COVID cases numbered approximately 7,240. Cases as of April 7th, so 1 month and 5 days later, are approximately 3,807. The last time they were that low was in October. Per the Texas Tribune, Texas is also doing well when it comes to the nationwide vaccination rollout. Texas is beating the national rate in terms of seniors fully vaccinated, 2 doses, which we refuse to do here in Quebec. One article reads, "But Texas is a large state. It's still going to take a while to vaccinate its 22 million residents and ranks 45th nationally in terms of the overall percentage of its population fully vaccinated." According to Becker's Hospital Review, it's about 36th nationally in terms of vaccination speed. Florida is experiencing similar success thanks to the bold leadership of its governor, Ron DeSantis, who opened restaurants and bars to 100% capacity way back in mid-September 2020. So he opened them up back to 100% capacity in September 2020. So now people can't use the excuse of vaccinations because the vaccines were only available in December. So why do Florida cases continue going down? Their COVID cases have gone up slightly since mid-February, probably due to the influx in traffic from spring break visitors. However, while the number of cases peaked in January, they've only continued to go down since then, with a few bumps here and there. 5 states had an increased jump in cases. In all but Florida, New York, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, the states remain in some form of lockdown. Together, they had more than 196,400 of the country's 453,360 cases reported in last week. CNN reported cases are increasing where lockdowns remain and decreasing where lockdowns are loosened or eradicated. Cases are increasing where lockdowns remain and decreasing where lockdowns are loosened or eradicated. Explain me that. At this point, it's worth observing that in places where states have reopened faster, cases seem to go down as a general whole. Whether this is because fresh air is helpful or herd immunity is being reached faster because people are out and about remains to be seen. But at the very least, it's absurd to suggest strict lockdowns should remain anywhere. In The Atlantic, Yasha Munk wrote about reopening in stages now that they've been doing the same thing for a year. Let's stop pretending that pandemic rules that made sense in April 2020 still make sense a year later, he said. I agree, in fact, it's hard to make a case that lockdowns were ever really necessary. So guys, this is more proof that lockdowns do not work. There is proof out there after a year of pandemic on how lockdowns don't work. We are not sure of the why lockdowns don't work, but we are sure that they don't work. So moving on. In the Washington Examiner, new data show nearly a quarter of UK COVID deaths not caused by virus. New data showed that nearly 1/4 of registered COVID-19 deaths in the United Kingdom were not caused by the virus. Updated numbers from the UK Office for National Statistics show that 23% of registered COVID-19 deaths are people who died with the virus, but not from infection. While the patients may have tested positive for COVID-19 at the time of their death, the virus itself was not the primary cause. The news comes as COVID-19 deaths in the country have fallen sharply, with no more than 28 deaths per day recorded in a country that was once registering deaths as high as 60 per day. The numbers seem to back up a warning last year from Dr. John Lee, a former pathology professor and NHS consultant pathologist, who claimed into question the way the UK was recording COVID-19 deaths. And here they have another link to another article saying, Milwaukee Medical Examiner says state's coronavirus deaths counts too high and includes people who died from other causes. If someone dies of a respiratory infection in the UK, the specific cause of the infection is not usually recorded, unless the illness is a rare notifiable disease, Lee wrote in the Spectator last year. We don't rarely test for flu or other seasonal infections. If the patient has, say, cancer, motor neuron disease, or another serious disease, this will be recorded as the cause of death, even if the final illness was a respiratory infection. This means UK certifications normally under record deaths due to respiratory infections. But Lee noted the illnesses listed as notifiable diseases were updated to include COVID-19, but not the flu, causing COVID-19 cases to be notified in a way that just would not be for flu or most other infections. In the current climate, anyone with a positive test for COVID-19 will certainly be known to clinical staff looking after them. If any of these patients dies, staff will have to record the COVID-19 designation on the death certificate, contrary to usual practice for most infections of this kind, Lee said. There's a big difference between COVID-19 causing death and COVID-19 being found in someone who died of other causes. Making COVID-19 COVID-19 notifiable might give the appearance of it causing increasing number of deaths. Whether this is true or not, it might appear far more of a killer than flu, simply because of the way deaths are recorded. But British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has not indicated the country is ready to lift virus restrictions, arguing that the country's lower numbers are a result of government policy and not the distribution of the coronavirus vaccine. He's crazy. Boris is a crazy man. It is very, very important for everybody to understand that the reduction in these numbers in hospitalizations and in deaths and infections has not been achieved by the vaccination program, Johnson said. People don't, I think, appreciate that it's the lockdown that has been overwhelmingly important in delivering this improvement in the pandemic and in the figures that we're seeing. So yes, of course, the vaccination program has helped, but the bulk of the work is reducing the disease has been done by the lockdown. BS. We know that is not true. So why is he lying? Why is he lying if we know this is not true? But let me just remind you with this article, the headline of this article. New data show nearly 1/4 of UK COVID-19 deaths were not caused by the virus. So 25% of deaths in the UK were not caused by the virus. And we saw another link to another Washington Examiner article where saying that the Milwaukee medical examiner has said, I don't want to misquote, so medical examiner says states coronavirus death count too high and includes people who died from other causes. Now, I found this article. I wasn't able to check or verify the veracity of the source. But considering what we just saw in the medical examiner of Milwaukee and in the Washington Examiner's article about UK, 25% of UK deaths not being caused by COVID-19, we can assume that this is true also. So laboratories in US can't find COVID-19 in one of 1,500 positive tests. CDC sued for massive fraud. Tests at 7 universities of all people examined shown that they did not have COVID, but just influenza A or B. European Union statistics. Corona virtually disappeared, even under mortality. Excuse me. A clinical scientist and immunologist, virologist at a Southern California laboratory says he and colleagues from 7 universities are suing the CDC for massive fraud. The reason? Not one of 1,500 samples of people tested positive could find COVID-19. All people were simply found to have influenza A and to a lesser extent influenza B. This is consistent with the previous findings of other scientists, which we have reported on several times. Dr. Derek Knauss, when my lab team and I subjected the 1,500 supposedly positive COVID-19 samples to Koch's postulates and put them under a SEM electron microscope, we found no COVID in all 1,500 samples. We found that all 1,500 samples were primarily influenza A and some influenza B, but no cases of COVID. We did not use the BS PCR test. And it's proven out there. Even the founder of the PCR test said it's BS to track COVID-19. Okay? So now we're finding that the PCR tests can't even accurately diagnose or find COVID in the patient. So not only do we have a big number of COVID deaths being wrongfully attributed to COVID when they did not die of COVID, they died with COVID. We have the Milwaukee Medical Examiner saying that many of the COVID deaths were actually caused by other causes. And now we have a doctor, a virologist, pathologist in a Southern California lab that tested 1,500 PCR positive samples and that found zero, not one, not at all, one of them with COVID. Not even one. Okay? Moving on. Michigan set to make coronavirus restrictions on businesses permanent. Is this where Legault wants to go? See that play of words there? Michigan, the governor of Michigan is set to make coronavirus restrictions on businesses permanent. The state of Michigan is moving to make the state's emergency coronavirus restrictions permanent. Michigan's regulatory agencies plan to make COVID-19 rules such as mask wearing, social distancing, daily health screenings, record keeping, and keeping a COVID-19 safety coordinator on site permanent for Michigan businesses. Businesses would be forced to require their customers wear masks whether or not they have been vaccinated against the virus. Since Michigan, or actually the contrary, since Quebec has followed in Michigan's footsteps basically throughout all this pandemic, is it safe to say, but from what we've heard from Dr. Arruda and tyrannical Prime Minister Philippe Legault, Francois Legault, Frank Legault, for the intimates, will he be following in her footsteps? I think he will. I might be wrong, and throw it back in my face if he doesn't. But seeing after a year of this pandemic and how he's acted and managed this pandemic, I don't see any other way of him not going in this direction. So now let's get a bit closer to home. Ontario, in the Toronto Sun, Ontario nurses claim they have been muzzled by College of Nurses of Ontario allegedly threatening to yank license of nurses who don't stick to the COVID script. That's interesting though. Like we've seen here in Quebec, the College of Doctors silencing and muzzling their doctors who speak out against these crazy, dangerous measures. While in Ontario, we've seen the same thing, but with the College of Nurses. A group of nurses held a demonstration Wednesday outside the College of Nurses of Ontario building in Midtown Toronto. According to our registered nurse, Jessica Ferrone, the objective was to show how some nurses feel they are being censored by the college for going public with their ideas about COVID. So we have in Quebec, the College of Doctors silencing doctors from standing up against these dangerous government measures, muzzling these doctors. And in Ontario, you have the same thing happening to the nurses. So it's safe to say that why I haven't seen one nurse speak up about this in Quebec is because they're probably being silenced by the College of Nurses also. And that is dangerous. These nurses and these doctors have a right to freedom of expression. And they're on the front line. They're in these hospitals. They see what's going on. They should be allowed to talk and say what they've seen. Now listen to this. Remember a few months ago when Trudeau banned us, Canadians, from leaving our country and going down south to maybe have a 1 week escape of these measures, of this pandemic, of this whole shitty year that's been 2020, 2021. Remember that? Well, meanwhile, where he is barring you of your constitutional right to leave and enter Canada freely as a Canadian citizen, he is letting in people people from India, Brazil, South Africa, who carry, according to them, dangerous variants of SARS-CoV-2. India's variant-fueled second wave coincided with spike in infected flights landing in Canada. As Indian officials ID worrying new double mutant COVID strain, Delhi continues to be Canada's top source of infected airline passengers. India's devastating second COVID-19 wave correlated with the sudden spike in infected passengers from that country arriving at Canadian airports. And that wave, say Indian health officials, is being fueled by a recently discovered double mutation strain of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, a variant that combines two mutations only previously found in separate strains that increase infectiousness and resistance to antibodies. Such mutations confer immune escape and increased infectivity. Read a March 24th statement from India's Health Ministry. These mutations have been found in about 15 to 20% of samples and do not match any previously cataloged VOCs. Between March 21st and April 6th, 121 flights landed in Toronto carrying infected passengers. 42 of those flights arrived from Delhi. Hello? Between March 21st and April 6th, what is that? Less than 3 weeks, barely over 2 weeks. 121 flights landed in Toronto carrying infected passengers. 42 of those flights came from India. But meanwhile, you can't go to Dominican Republic or Mexico for a week to escape these government measures and maybe refuel. But yet you could accept 42 flights from India, where they're having thousands, tens of thousands of new cases a day, and of thousands of deaths a day, with a dangerous, according to you, double mutated variant. It just boggles my mind. And then people still follow these governments and listen to every single word like it's fucking gospel. Sorry for my language. Yet from one side of the mouth, they ban you from going on a 1 week vacation. Yet from the other side of the mouth, they let in 121 flights in less than 3 weeks carrying infected passengers. Come on. You want it to get even crazier? Today's arrivals at Montreal Trudeau Airport. I will not name the Canadian cities because at the end of the day, you have to let Canadians travel inside their own country. It's their right as a Canadian citizen. But today, okay, I will read international flights today, from today, all day, and tomorrow morning. So, sorry about that. A little technical problem. We're back in. So, like I was saying, I will be reading you international flights from all day today to tomorrow morning. All right? So here we go. From Detroit, from New Jersey, which is still one of the worst states for COVID in the United States. From Dallas, from Doha, Qatar, from Frankfurt, Germany, from Guatemala City, from Paris, from Newark, from Chicago, from Charlotte, from Atlanta. And then tomorrow morning is basically only from Canada. But then they start again in the early afternoon into the late afternoon. So these are all the international flights that are still arriving at Montreal. You wanna see a crazier one? Here, let me see, earlier flights. It will be more interesting. Here we go. From Toronto Pearson. Okay? From Vancouver. Okay, so I will not... From New Delhi, India. That arrived today at 5:20 in the morning. Mexico City. Continuing. From Ireland. Ethiopia and Ireland. New Delhi, so that's the second flight from India today. Detroit, Charlotte, Zurich, Frankfurt, Dallas, Newark, Amsterdam. Tokyo, Charlotte, Abu Dhabi, Beijing, Seoul, South Korea, Tokyo, Pakistan, Prague, Lima, Peru, Tokyo, Bogota, Colombia, Detroit, Frankfurt, Los Angeles, Dallas, London, England. This is crazy, guys. Turkey, Newark, London, England, Chicago, Shanghai, Seoul, Charlotte, Dallas, Atlanta, Miami. These are all the flights today. Arriving today in Toronto. International flights. But yet you're not allowed to go to Mexico or Dominican Republic for 5 or 7 days? How can people still support these governments? I don't fucking understand. It pisses me off. Sorry for the language, but it pisses me off. People say, oh, you don't support the measures, then you want people to die. Nah, man. By you supporting measures, you want people to die. Because we've seen that already. I've shown that already with studies from mental illness, suicide, the augmentation in death from cancer because people are scared of going to the hospital to get checked, or heart attacks or strokes, because you've instilled so much fear in them. Not only the government, the media has a part to do in that too. And yet you still support these governments that from one side are not letting you go on a 1 week vacation, but on the other side are letting in hundreds of flights from countries with dangerous variants, according to them, and infected passengers. Don't forget, 121 flights have arrived in less than 3 weeks with infected passengers in them, 42 of them coming from India with a dangerous variant. It's crazy. It's crazy how people still support these governments. Let me get into the media part of it. CNN, from the Washington Examiner, CNN technical director admits to pushing COVID panic and using death tracker to do it. A CNN technical director was documented on an undercover video admitting to peddling of fear about the coronavirus pandemic and using the daily death tracker on the screen to do so. COVID? Gangbusters with ratings, right? Which is why we constantly have the death toll on the side. Let's make it higher, CNN technical director Charlie Chester told an undercover journalist, according to the political action group Project Veritas. Breaking, part 2. CNN director reveals that network practices art of manipulation to change the world. COVID, okay, just repeating the other quote. No such thing as unbiased news. It's fear. Fear really drives numbers, TV ratings. Fear is the thing that keeps you tuned in, Chester added. Chester seemed aware that what he was saying was controversial, acknowledging that no one ever says these things out loud. Chester also declared there is no such thing as unbiased news and that it doesn't exist. This is coming from the most trusted name in news, CNN. How? Bunch of bullshit. So now you have CNN admitting on video that they mislead to instill fear in you about COVID. And he goes on later in the undercover videos saying that when COVID is over, they will do the same thing with climate change. So watch that. What I've been warning for the last year, soon enough, in the next few months, you're going to start seeing it in action. So mark these words. April 20th, 4/20, 2021. Experts find more in global news. Experts find more evidence. This is from April 18th, so 2 days ago. Experts find more evidence COVID-19 is airborne, that we need to rethink indoor spaces. The authors of a new paper that found increasingly concrete evidence that COVID-19 is predominantly airborne say that we need to be focusing on preventing infections in indoor settings and rethinking how ventilation systems either help spread or dissipate the virus. A Lancet report published Thursday from epidemiologists and experts across both Canada, US, and the UK found an overwhelming amount of evidence that the disease was spread through aerosols, tiny airborne particles that come from people's mouths when they breathe, talk, or cough. According to the University of Toronto professor David Feisman, one of the authors of the study, the results of the report come as an important implication for experts and governments to consider more stringent measures, public health control measures in indoor spaces. So now we're having more and more proof where we've had this. I've talked about this before, about how the virus spreads indoors, not outdoors. And yet the government keeps on wanting us to stay indoors. How is that even logical? It doesn't make sense at all. So I ask, why, knowingly, want to keep us inside, indoors, and keep us from going outdoors when the virus spreads indoors and basically doesn't spread outdoor? Here, I'll show you. In the Irish Times, outdoor transmission accounts for 0.1% of the state's COVID-19 cases. Just 262 cases traced to outdoor activities since pandemic began, official figures reveal. Just one confirmed case of COVID-19 in every 1,000, one in every 1,000, is traced to outdoor transmission, new figures reveal. Come on, man. Something doesn't make sense here. Somebody needs to explain this to me. Or somebody in a stupid newsroom or the press conference room where they have this press conference every day. When is there going to be a journalist that's going to stand up and ask a real fucking question? Especially this one. Why, if we know that the virus spreads indoors and not outdoors, does the government want to keep us indoors? It's a very simple question. I'm going to wrap this up because I'm starting to get mad. Washington Post quietly admits the media was wrong on the dangers of outdoor events. After a little more than a year into the pandemic, the Washington Post has admitted that it's safer to be outside after having been part of the media cabal that labeled outdoor events as super spreaders of COVID-19. The Post article penned by reporters Kareem Brouillard and Lenny Bernstein was headlined, "A year into the pandemic, it's even more clear that it's safer to be outside." And in essence, admitting that the media had been wrong on outdoor gatherings in general. Hello? Now Washington Post is starting to wake up? Please. because they're starting to see that their lies are being exposed. So now they're trying to backtrack and protect themselves. Right? Let me give you one more. Study. Antibody drug could offer immediate protection to unvaccinated people exposed to COVID-19. The Regin Cove antibody cocktail may help provide immediate protection to unvaccinated people who are exposed to the virus. Said George D. Yankopoulos, Reginon's president and chief scientific officer. Let me repeat that. Study. Antibody drug could offer immediate protection to unvaccinated people exposed to COVID-19. The Regin Cove antibody cocktail may help provide immediate protection to unvaccinated people who are exposed to the virus. I rest my case. There is plenty of evidence and treatments out there to reopen our economy. There's enough proof out there that the virus spreads indoors, and only 1 in 1,000 times does it spread outdoors. And yet the government wants to keep us indoors. Ask yourself that question. Why? All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry for the emotional video. Hope to see you soon. Peace out.